Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my top 10 do not draft players for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, I'm going to be discussing 10 players that I believe you guys should not be drafting for fantasy football in 2021 based upon where they are going at their current average draft position. But before we get on into the breakdown of my top 10 do not draft players, I'd like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football Championship. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you hit that like button down below to help boost this video up the algorithm so that more beautiful people like yourself can see today's video. I'd also like to let you guys know that my rankings are available for free. Link down below to the rankings in the description as well as in the pinned comment. So without further ado, let's get into it. My first do not draft player for fantasy football in 2021 is running back of the Las Vegas Raiders, Josh Jacobs. ADP right now, running back number 22 off of the board. But in a lot of drafts, if I'm being honest with you guys, Jacobs comes off the board as running back like 16, 17, or 18. He's going in the 3rd or 4th round in a majority of ESPN, Yahoo, and NFL drafts. And at that draft price, he is not even going through my mind to draft him at that point. Josh Jacobs is a talented running back, but what the Raiders did in the offseason was questionable. They dismantled the offensive line, and you know what you do after you dismantle the offensive line? You bring in a new running back in Kenyon Drake, formerly of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I don't think that Kenyon Drake is Christian McCaffrey or something and is going to become the lead back in Vegas for the Raiders, but he is going to take away a lot of receiving opportunity for Josh Jacobs. A lot of reason why people were clamoring for Josh Jacobs last offseason was because a lot of talks of an increased workload in the receiving game, and that did not end up coming true. Last year in 2020, Josh Jacobs played in 15 games, having 273 rushing attempts for 1,065 rushing yards, as well as having 33 receptions for 238 receiving yards and 12 total touchdowns on the season. Kenyon Drake is also the best backup running back that Josh Jacobs has played with on his team since 2019 when he got in the NFL thus far. So if Drake takes away some of the rushing upside, he takes away a lot of the receiving upside, then what are we left with Josh Jacobs? We are left with a touchdown-dependent running back on a team that probably won't be amazing. So that's just not something I'm looking to invest in early on in fantasy football drafts. So Josh Jacobs is a straight-up fade at this point. Next up, we have wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs, Mecole Hardman, underdog ADP, wide receiver number 42 off of the board right now. Now, every single year since Mecole Hardman has been in the NFL, 2019, 2020, and now 2021, it feels like people are getting trapped into seeing this upside that is not existent there. Last year in 2020, Mecole Hardman played in 16 games, having 62 targets, 41 receptions, 560 receiving yards, and 4 total receiving touchdowns. Now, a lot of the reason why people like Mecole Hardman this offseason is because Sammy Watkins is gone, and Mecole Hardman is going to fill that role to a T, right? He is going to be the clear wide receiver number 2 in Kansas City, and the upside there is immense. Now, I agree, the wide receiver number 2 in Kansas City, whoever it will be, does have a lot of upside in fantasy football because of how good this offense is and how good Patrick Mahomes is. Now, Mecole Hardman is a very fast player. He ran a 4.33 at his combine, 99th percentile 40-yard dash, so he's fast. That's cool, but what else does he do? I don't really see any reason why Mecole Hardman is being seen as the clear wide receiver number 2 in Kansas City. I think, personally, that Byron Pringle fills the role of the wide receiver number 2 that Sammy Watkins left better than Mecole Hardman. I wouldn't be surprised if Demarcus Robinson had more targets at the end of the season than Mecole Hardman. So for that reason, and that reason alone, I'm going to be fading Mecole Hardman because it seems like everyone's falling for Mecole Hardman because of false promises that they have made up in their own head that magically Mecole Hardman is the clear wide receiver number 2 in Kansas City, but it probably could end up being that he's not, and one of the other wide receivers on the roster is. Next up, staying in Kansas City, we have quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, ADP quarterback number 1 off the board. Now, I know what you might be thinking, Nick. Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL, and I'm not going to debate you on that. Last year in 15 games, he had 588 passing attempts, 4,750 passing yards, and 38 passing touchdowns to very little interception. So Patrick Mahomes is a dominant NFL quarterback. But what I don't like about Patrick Mahomes is the fact that you have to probably draft him in most leagues inside of the 2nd or 3rd round to acquire him. And in my opinion, the first 4 rounds of the draft is where you need to be drafting running backs and wide receiver. You need to get those studs early on in your draft. And then in the 5th round, I'm perfectly willing to pull the trigger on a Lamar Jackson, on a Dak Prescott inside of the 5th round. But drafting a quarterback inside of the 2nd round severely damages your running back and your wide receiver core when you could have just waited 2, 3 more rounds maybe, and inside the 5th, 6th round, you could get another quarterback, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, who could be the number 1 overall quarterback in fantasy football. I think the quickest way to lose your draft is to pull the trigger too early on the first quarterback off the board, because normally there's a bit of a lull before the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th quarterback are all off the board. Next up, we have running back of the Philadelphia Eagles, Miles Sanders, ADP running back number 20 off the board. Now, it's kind of a similar situation to McCole Hardman, where we always get fooled into believing that this guy has some immense upside. Now, Miles Sanders is definitely a talented player, but this situation is very, very murky in Philadelphia. Sure, they end up getting rid of Doug Peterson, head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, and they bring in Nick Sirianni. And sure, maybe that will eliminate the quote-unquote running back by committee that has been instilled into the Philadelphia Eagles. But if you look at preseason, if you look at training camp, all these reports that have came out are that Miles Sanders is the lead back there, but he's not the clear number 1 running back. This is a clear running back by committee with the other running backs behind Miles Sanders. Now, could he break through and become the lead back there? 100%. But it feels like Nick Sirianni is instilling a similar offense there in Philadelphia as Doug Peterson did in terms of the running game. And that will mean that Miles Sanders will kind of get screwed over out of being a top 12, top 18-ish running back. You're getting him at running back number 20 off the board. And I'm not really willing to pay that price for a running back who I believe will be stuck in a committee. Last year in 2020, he gets all the hype. Some leagues he's getting drafted inside the end of the 1st round. 12 games, 164 rushes, 867 rushing yards, 6 total touchdowns, 28 receptions, 197 receiving yards. The one kind of selling point on Miles Sanders is the fact that he is pretty talented in the receiving game, but he does rely very heavily, if you noticed and you look at his game log, in those games where he has that huge rush. He gets like a 50-yard rush, a 50-yard catch, and that big touchdown. That's what elevates him to having a great week. If he doesn't do that, he's really a boom or bust running back in what I believe to be a running back by committee in Philadelphia. Next up, we have Jarvis Landry, wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, ADP wide receiver number 49 off the board. Now, when it comes to drafting Jarvis Landry, what you're drafting is a safe wide receiver. And while I preach being safe early on in your fantasy draft, in the first 4 rounds, you want to wrap that metaphorical condom over your roster and you want to keep it safe. But when you're in the 9th round, the 10th round, the 11th round, where Jarvis Landry might come off the board, I'm looking to take a risk. I already have wide receivers on my roster at this point that I believe have the upside to be a top 12 wide receiver. I have safe wide receivers that I drafted early on in the draft that are going to be a part of my lineup every single week. So why the fuck am I looking to, in one of my last picks of the draft, in like the 9th, 10th, 11th round, sometimes like the 8th round, draft a wide receiver that I see virtually no upside with? The Cleveland Browns are an ultra run-heavy team. Once Kevin Stefanski took over, they were going to run the ball a lot, and it makes sense. Why wouldn't you run the ball a lot if you have the running backs the likes of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb? So while Jarvis Landry is certainly a safe pick, there is very little upside to be seen with Jarvis Landry. Even when Odell was hurt last year, Jarvis Landry didn't instantly turn into this top 10 wide receiver in fantasy football like he was when he was in Miami with the Dolphins. Last year in 15 games, he had 101 targets, 72 receptions, 840 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. I just don't really see the immense amount of upside that Jarvis Landry could have, because to me, there virtually is no upside with Jarvis Landry. Next up, we have tight end of the Green Bay Packers, Robert Tonyan, ADP right now, tight end number 9 off the board. Now, when it comes to Robert Tonyan, he's an interesting player because I wouldn't say he's necessarily a do not draft player where you cannot draft him, but everything inside me tells me that this guy is not going to have anywhere near close to the season he had last year, where he was a top 5 tight end. In 16 games, he had only 59 targets. He caught 52 of those balls for 586 receiving yards. And the reason why he finished so high at the end of the season is because he had 11 total receiving touchdowns. Now, he's on the Green Bay Packers. This is a team that's going to be really good. So is it entirely possible that Robert Tonyan scores 11 touchdowns again? Yes, but I wouldn't bet on that. And if he doesn't see that extremely high amount of touchdowns, then he's probably going to be a complete and utter swing and a miss inside of drafts if he is seeing a similar target share to 2020. Next up, we have wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals, JaMarr Chase, wide receiver number 27 off of the board right now. When it comes to JaMarr Chase, again, I've talked about this a lot in the video. It has nothing to do with his talent. This guy is an immensely talented wide receiver. But what it has to do with is the fact that there is clearly an issue of rust with JaMarr Chase. He can't get open in fucking practice against the Bengals defensive backs. He cannot get open against the Bengals defensive backs. The Bengals defense is terrible, and he can't get open. In preseason, this guy was basically invisible. He was doing his John Cena, you can't see me impression in preseason. He did nothing. Now, I understand that eventually he'll shake off the rust, and he'll be very, very good during the season. But I'm not too sure I want to invest in JaMarr Chase when just a couple picks earlier, I could get a guy like T. Higgins. And in a lot of drafts, JaMarr Chase ends up getting drafted ahead of T. Higgins. So why not just take the guy who's proven it in the NFL, who's done it with Joe Burrow, who is not struggling because he hasn't played football since 2019. The fact that JaMarr Chase opted out of college football in 2020 is likely the reason why he's struggling in 2021. I think his NFL career will be of a great wide receiver, but right now in 2021, I'm not looking to be targeting JaMarr Chase. Next up, we have another rookie tight end of the Atlanta Falcons, Kyle Pitts, underdog ADP tight end number 4 off the board. Now, his numbers in college are chef's kiss, beautiful. At the age of 20 in 2020, played in 8 games, 43 receptions, 67 targets, 770 receiving yards, 17.9 yards per reception, a 14.2% target share in the Florida Gators offense with 12 receiving touchdowns. This guy is getting talked up to be the next Megatron, to be Calvin Johnson, to be a wide receiver that plays tight end. And that's all fine and dandy. But when you look at the statistics of rookie tight ends, in the last decade, in the last 10 years, one tight end has finished inside the top 5 in their rookie year, and that is Evan Ingram. Now, can Kyle Pitts eviscerate that? Could he become the number 1 tight end in fantasy football? 100% if he lives up to the expectations of being Calvin Johnson, being a wide receiver that plays tight end. That is 100% possible. But there's also a chance that we're overdrafting him at tight end number 4, and he finishes as tight end number 6, number 7. And sure, that's a good year. That is a great year for a rookie tight end. But when you have the expectations that Kyle Pitts is a top 4 tight end, could crack the top 3, and he doesn't, you are going to be very, very disappointed. It's basically just based upon where he's getting drafted. A lot of the times, to me, he is getting drafted way too high compared to the other tight ends like TJ Hawkinson, who I like a ton. Next up, we have wide receiver of the Washington football team, Curtis Samuel. Now, Curtis Samuel is a very interesting player because he moves from the Carolina Panthers to the Washington football team, coming off the board as wide receiver 52, which is with his old head coach, Riverboat Ron Rivera. And I believe that Curtis Samuel is in a fine situation to succeed. But how sold am I that he's the clear wide receiver 2 there? Not very much. And I'm also sold on the fact that in Washington, there's really only one wide receiver that you want, and that's Terry McLaurin. Ryan Fitzpatrick has a tendency to just have this lock-on feature in his head where he just locks on to one wide receiver on the roster. That wide receiver is going to be Terry McLaurin. It's not going to be Curtis Samuel. So I think the upside of Curtis Samuel is severely limited by the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick is the quarterback, and also by the fact that, I'm going to be honest, I don't even think Curtis Samuel is the clear wide receiver number 2 in Washington. In 2020, in Carolina, in 15 games, he had 97 targets for 77 receptions, 851 receiving yards, and 3 total touchdowns on the season. So Curtis Samuel had a all-right year, but in 2021, I really expect things to slow down, and I don't see too much upside for Samuel in the Washington football team offense. Final player here, another rookie running back out of UNC, Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos, underdog ADP running back number 23. Now, it seems like with Javonte Williams, there is no middle ground. Either you believe that Javonte Williams is a world beater at running back, his ADP, when he gets drafted in the 5th round, you are just erect to click the draft button. You are so pumped up to draft him because Melvin Gordon ain't shit. He's not going to do anything. Or you're on the other standpoint with me that thinks, hey, Melvin Gordon's there. Vic Fangio, as head coach of the Denver Broncos, has liked to use a 2 running back system. Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay. Melvin Gordon played really good last year because Lindsay was hurt. without an injury here, I think Gordon and Javonte Williams basically are in a crash course into themselves to make them both irrelevant for fantasy football. I believe that Melvin Gordon, on the final year of his contract in Denver, will be run into the ground. I think they're going to use him a lot in 2022. Would I be surprised if Javonte Williams was a top 10 running back? No. But in 2021, with Melvin Gordon there, I wouldn't bet on the fact that Javonte Williams was going to be very good in 2021. So let me know what you guys think about all these running backs. Do you like them? Do you hate them? Are you avoiding them? Just like me. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I love you guys all. Again, make sure you follow me on Twitter, @NotoriousFNTSY. Hit that subscribe button down below. I love you guys all. As always, goodbye.